ladies and gentlemen? I hope you are having a wonderful Monday morning. Welcome to the Monday Market Update. I thank you for spending your valuable time with us. We're going to try and make this as valuable and entertaining, charming as possible. My name is Sean Grapevine. I am the Vice President of Strategy here at UMortgage, and I'm joined by the one, the only. If you don't know who he is, you're gonna find out. Just go on YouTube, and he's usually right there on the first page next to Mr. Beast and Sacramento Kings highlights. His name is Matt, the mortgage guy, Gougé. He's a former professional poker dealer, current professional the branch manager here at UMortgage, and loan officer as well. Incredible guy, loves educating buyers and me. So welcome to the show, Mr. Gougé. How was your weekend?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, and one thing real quick before getting into my weekend and all that stuff. There's no more important time than now to educate buyers, and you mentioned it because that's kind of the passion behind the YouTube channel. Like, the market's funky. We're seeing things we haven't seen forever. And so, programs like this is intended to educate people in uncertain times. So we'll get more into that later. I had a great weekend. We always start with me, Sean. Let's start with you today. How was your weekend, buddy? Did that lovely wife of yours cook any delicious meals? Because I see all of them all over, social media all the time. You go first today.
Okay. Wow. Thank you so much. You had a great weekend. So usually it's 98% of the time I'm cooking. I am the default cook. I used to be a professional cook, so it is my lot in life to do that. But I have a lot of fun. I did make some great pork belly stir fry yesterday, super spicy. Oh man, it was really good. And on Saturday morning, I PR'd my 5K time by 1 minute and 27 seconds. So that felt great. I mean, it was like an all American weekend. It was running, gardening, cooking. I watched a lot of sports, mostly very boring sports that other people hate, like F1 and cycling. So that wasn't very American of me. But other than that, pretty good all-American weekend. Didn't think about the market. Didn't think about mortgages. It's great. I had a fantastic weekend.
Awesome.
What about you?
Well, sorry that I didn't give you the credit. I think like when you post, it's like dinner with wife, and so I assume she was the one doing the cooking.
No, yeah, I'm more just trying to remind her on a regular basis how lucky she is to be married to me.
That's good. I try that as well. I don't know if I've figured out that the proper strategy for that yet, but yeah, it's I'll tell you something. I had an account executive. Here's one thing to try with your friends. Okay. Whenever you see anybody, whether it's a colleague or whether it's a friend, when they leave, you say, "It was a pleasure seeing me," and that's something that old account executive of mine used to do every time he went anywhere. So shout out to my buddy.
He would say, "All right, it was a pleasure seeing me."
Right. It was a pleasure seeing me. Yeah, like reminding people how awesome it is to be in Sean's life. It wouldn't hurt, bud.
My dad would tell me, "Come again when you can't stay so long." So that's how he treated me. Maddie, tell us about your weekend. What'd you do?
More kids sports as usual. Quick recap. My 11-year-old had the go-ahead run. He hit it in extra innings in their Saturday Little League game, and then his best buddy Dieter just struck out the side 1-2-3 to end the game because they were playing an away game. So that was exciting and fun. And then my older son, his travel basketball team, that is a bunch of the freshmen from his high school all playing on this travel team together, is now 6-0, I think. And so they played a little tournament, won all 4 games. The cool part was he connected with an old buddy of his that he used to do jiu-jitsu with. They both left jiu-jitsu, both got into basketball, and they met each other in the championship of this basketball tournament.
No way.
Basketball's intense. For anybody who doesn't know, basketball is an intense sport, especially when it's like travel basketball and it's close. It's a fun time. I really, really enjoy that almost as much as I enjoy helping homeowners get into homes, which is another activity I did this weekend was a lot of calls from agents, a lot of calls from clients, just
love to hear it.
looking to see what they can do to get in the house, because this is the time. April, May, and June is when people start moving and shaking in the housing market for sure.
Oh man, I love to hear it. Things are picking up. Things are. I mean, UMortgage, things are picking up. But we have week after, not to brag, week after. I'm constantly surprised and impressed by our loan officers. Week after week of record-breaking lock weeks. We've got more loans in active than we've ever had before, which is crazy because we were around in 2021 and 2022, and it's really exciting. So the business is out there, and I've seen inventories up. Although whenever I see inventory up, I'm like, oh, well, when that happens, when mortgage rates go up, I generally just think it's because mortgage rates went up. People are like, I'd just rather not buy a house now. So, but the business definitely seems to be out there. Speaking of business, let's talk about the numbers. Last week, and for those of you who are new to this, we generally go over the numbers for a few minutes here. So some of the leading economic indicators that happened last week, that are happening this week, that are going to come out next week, to set the stage for how to essentially. We don't do any of this so you can predict what's going to happen, and we don't spend any time predicting what's going to happen. And when I do predict what's going to happen, I'm wrong 100% of the time. So you can always just bet against me, and you'll be in good shape. But really, just we want to be able to provide this context so you can have effective conversations with your buyers, with your clients, with your your business partners, and so that you can really understand what's driving some of the decisions that the Fed makes, and to be able to me, my goal is always to be the credible, authoritative expert in finances, right? Real estate agents and loan officers, we are the closest to financial markets of anybody in most people's lives. Now, some people have financial planners, but not very many people. In the absence of a financial planner, we're it. And a lot of loan officers don't take that responsibility, and agents don't take that responsibility as deeply as I think that they could or should. And so I think it's great to be able to talk about what's happening in our economy, which we're active participants in, with as much authority as possible. That being said, last week, we got a bunch of good news. Again, really good news if you are not a loan officer or a real estate agent. Retail sales were up. That's typically seen as great news. They were up way more than anybody thought they would be up. And immediately, mortgage bonds tanked, or mortgage bond pricing tanked, and mortgage rates went up. Matt, why is it again that good news is bad news for people in the real estate market?
Well, to make a long story short, when there's good economic news, it gives more credence to higher for longer. The Fed doesn't have to do anything to, cut interest rates anytime soon, as long as the, economy's doing fine, jobs are doing fine, and, inflation hasn't gone back to this made up number of 2% that they're targeting. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If we started to see problems in the economy, more unemployment, it lends itself to the Fed having to, intervene, inject a little bit of juice in the economy, and that's what pulls mortgage interest rates down. So for anybody who follows mortgage interest rates, and if that's the only thing you're rooting for unemployment, you're rooting for economic turmoil, because that's what brings mortgage interest rates down.
Yeah, it's a bit macabre, if you will, and but at the same time, I mean, Jerome Powell, the head of the Fed, just comes out and says it. He's like, hey, we think that we need economic activity to cool down. That's why interest rates are as high as they are. And the leading indicator for for activity to cool down is by people losing their jobs. And so, he doesn't beat around the bush. They expect unemployment to go up before interest rates come down. So far, we've seen no indication of that. Every week, there's initial jobless claim numbers that come out. So this is the number of jobless claims made in the prior week across the country. And for the last 8 weeks, at least, the expectation from economists has been 210 or maybe 215, 220,000. Oh, I guess last week. Hold on, we'll get to it in a second. 215, 220,000 initial jobless claims. And then it's always come in just a little bit lower than that. So again, if jobless claims come in lower, that's good news for the economy, bad news for rates. Last week, I guess 211,000, right?
I do recall that, your 211,000 guess.
It's off by 1,000 at 212.
So close, bro.
That's
so close.
I'm gonna up my guess for next week to. I'm gonna go it's gonna be an uptick. There's gonna be an uptick. I feel an uptick. 217.
217.
You wanna register a guess there?
I think 215 is what's just
calling your name.
It just popped into my head. Yeah, 215. I go 215. You go 217. Is it the closest without going over? Is Price is Right?
No. Closest absolute value.
Okay. All right. So I got basically 216 and below. I'm a lock here. I'm the favorite.
We'll share 216. We'll be equally right at 216.
Well, yeah, equally right. So yeah, I got 215, 999 and below. There you go, Sean. See, that's why you make the big bucks, pal.
Oh boy. So last week we had retail sales up. We had jobless claims down. Home sales and housing starts and permits were all down slightly, but in pretty good place. Obviously, those are what are going to cure our inventory issues, and they are still. I've read an article recently, like the amount of houses being built, even though, like you said, in your market, 30% of all purchases are new builds. They said it's going to take like 4 or 5 years to get us out of this inventory rut, even at the rate we're at now, which sucks. But it means I love a little bit of turmoil in the market. It really allows experts to be experts and to really differentiate themselves. So, if you can use some tricks that you learn along the way, I like knowing how to deal with everything, benefits you more when the market is tough. So this week in news, we're going to have new home sales. So again, that's the sales of, right, like we measured housing starts last week. The homes that are being finished, we're going to be there should be 670,000 or so new home sales. That number comes out tomorrow. We've got a big one, a quarterly number, GDP. Estimated to have grown at 2.2%. That's what economists think. 2.2, that's an annualized number. I mean, that number, it's been blown out of the water like 3 out of the last 5 times. And then the other 2, it's been slightly blown out of the water. So my guess is that come tomorrow at 8:30 a.m., GDP number is going to come out. It's going to be 3.1. It's going to be way higher than anybody expected yet again. And the stock market, or the bond market, is going to have they're not going to like it, because again, good news means higher rates for longer from the Fed, which means rates go up. So, but I mean, it's hard to complain about the GDP of our country growing at a healthy rate too. So it's good and the bad. And we've got initial jobless claims, and we've got PCE. PCE is the Fed's preferred measure of inflation. And now this is something you and I talked about last week, about how the Fed, how you claim that the Fed has arbitrarily made up the 2% inflation number for CPI. That they've said this is their target. We want 2%. And then we came up with some conspiracy theories that maybe it's actually a little higher than that. They just don't want to indicate that 2.6 or 2.7 is the number they kind of want to overshoot. You remember that conspiracy theory?
I do remember that conspiracy theory. I think I'm still on it, to be honest.
I bet you are. I think this might kind of indicate against your conspiracy theory, because PCE for the last couple months has come, and so again, PCE is measured as a percentage of increase in goods over the course of a year. It uses slightly different buckets than CPI. PCE also has a core element where they back out energy and transportation, and they're really only measuring like goods and food and stuff like that. And PCE for the last several months has been sub 3% and has been around 2.6 to 2.8% between PCE and core PCE, and they're very close. Unlike CPI, which CPI and core CPI are like I think 0.5 points apart. But they're 2.6 and 2.7, and I haven't really seen any indication that the Fed, who claims that this is their preferred inflation metric, is like, this is good enough.
Right. Yeah. So they're not going to say that. But if you go back 2019, it was at 2.7. Like we're at, pre-stimulus, economic injection rate cut environment. And so I don't know, maybe, well, not just a maybe, they've said it out loud. The Fed doesn't want to cut too early and then have to go back and raise rates and, have inflation come roaring back. So I get that.
It'd be an economic and PR disaster if they reduced early and then had to backtrack on that. I mean, it takes a lot. The gears turn slowly. The ship turns slowly. So going back and forth is yeah, you're right. You're right about that. Definitely not on their list of things to do.
Yeah. So maybe they get 6 straight months of, in the 2.5 range, 2.5 to 2.7 range. And that's enough confidence to say like, oh yeah, we're just kidding about 2.0, like 2.5 is cool. So we can start unwinding this like 11 rate hikes that we had over the last couple of years and, pull that Fed funds rate down and interest rates will follow.
Personally, I think that the Fed isn't going to reduce interest rates because it can. It's only going to reduce interest rates because it has to. So when it sees severely constricted economy, and not just a little constricted, but a severely constricted economy as a result of high rates, because I mentioned this last week, as we saw in 2008 and 2020, all the rate lowering arrows in their quiver didn't really have the intended effect. It didn't have enough of an intended effect. And then in 2008, they had to come out with TARP and HARP and like inject money into the economy in other ways. And then in 2020, they were like, well, what if we just sent checks to like you know what? We were going to try and inject money into the economy by lowering interest rates. They were like, from now on, it's like you get a free car.
Just
you get a free car.
Helicopter in money and just drop barrels.
It was great. I mean, I had a great time. I'm not going to lie. It was, a lot of refis, a lot of purchases, low rates.
It was a great time in mortgage and real estate. I cannot argue with that.
But yeah, we're certainly paying the piper now. As far as chances of a rate hike, we kind of go over this every week. The next rate reduction. I think that's really kind of core to the point too. Is like it's not really a matter of when is there going to be a rate reduction. It's a matter of if at this point. And traders certainly reflect that. So there's a way you can track the chances of a rate reduction on the internet using the CME Group's FedWatch tool. Super cool and pretty depressing right now. The next Fed meeting is May 1st. And right now there is a 3.9% chance of a reduction in rate. Now that is compared to a month ago, there was a 12% chance. So, I mean, it's been pretty dire and dour for a little while. June 12th is the following meeting. We're only at a 16% chance of a rate reduction compared with 66% chance that traders thought about a month ago. So they are certainly souring on the thoughts of that. If you go all the way to July 31st, you've got a 42% chance of a rate reduction. And compared with a month ago, it was at 88. So traders and Matt and myself are pretty grim on whether or not there will be a rate reduction. However, the market seems relatively healthy. I mean, you've got clients who want to buy houses despite 7.5% interest rates.
Yeah, and I think too, there's all of this data around what rates are doing and that. There's also leading indicators which I like to follow, like what are consumers doing? And not to get us off track on our normally scheduled program, but
go for it.
There is plenty of companies out there like Redfin that have a lot of data. And so whether you use that for your home search or not, like they've got data on how many people are searching every month and how many people are touring homes. And these are the leading indicators: mortgage purchase applications, touring activity, Google searches for home for sale. And when you look at like year over year, just like last week, Redfin put out this survey. You got like 7.4% interest rates versus 6.6. So you would think that like it would just halt the
Sure.
home buying. Mortgage purchase applications were up from a week earlier. The down 10% year on year. But then like the home buyer index, touring activity, like touring activity was up 33% from the start of the year. And if you compare that to historically and just say, oh, hey, it's April, it's not January anymore. Well, yeah, last year, though, it was only up 23% from beginning of year to this week in April. And so, home buyers are resilient. And I think, my personal opinion, home buyers are more and more used to high interest rates. They understand it costs more to buy a house because of where interest rates are at. And they're not going to continue to wait. You know what I thought about doing, Sean? I thought about making a video.
What'd you think about?
I thought about making a video because I think this is a question I think people should pose to themselves. What exactly are you waiting for? And I don't say that to be like, you must buy now. I say that to say like, what exactly do you think or expect or want to happen? Because for some people, they don't know or they're not realistic. If I said, hey, Sean, right now, the houses in the neighborhood I'm looking at are 600 grand and rates are 7.4. I want to be able to buy that house for 450 and a 5% interest rate. Well, you never want to buy a house, right? So you got to be realistic with yourself. Maybe you want to put more money in savings. Maybe you've got, your eye on a certain part of the neighborhood where you're like, if I could get that at like, sub 600 and rates were sub 7, that would work for me. But realistic expectations versus mindlessly follow like some doomer that tells you you're going to get a 40% discount on a house because like all this unrealistic stuff is going to happen and housing is going to crash. Like that will just put you in the seat, which I don't want people to be in, which is the people I talked to in 2021 and pre-approved them and they didn't buy, or people I talked to in 2017 who sat on the sidelines for 7 years and are like, I can't believe it's 2024. I literally I have applications of people that were willing and able to buy and let maybe fear, uncertainty, and doubt cloud their judgment. And now they're 7 years renting at about, 25 grand a year in rent. That don't feel good either.
I love it. I think you should do that. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, and we've said it before. It's like this is all about levers, and the real estate market is an excellent example of how the Fed works, right? Like when rates go down, it is like the way the Fed thinks about it is like that's an infusion of money into the economy. When they lower the federal funds rate, that means there's more money in the economy. When mortgage rates go down, that means there's more money in the real estate thing. And like what happened last time rates went down? Well, inflation ticked up. What does inflation ticking up mean? Prices go up. Like that's like we live in a little microcosm of this. So when mortgage rates go down, more money will enter the system. Real estate inflation, or for an investor, return on investment goes up, and prices get more expensive. And it's like you gotta strike while the iron's hot. Although I am sympathetic to the plight of I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. I saw a statistic that was like in 1968. Interest rates hit 7%. If you would have waited for them to go down, you would have waited until 1983 or some insane thing like that. And it's much easier to say, hey, you could buy a house then with a 10 or 15 or 20% interest rate, and the cost, there wasn't a cost of living crisis. And I want to be sympathetic to the fact that I probably would I would not consider myself able to buy my own house right now at at its new value and the new interest rate. So it's not, there is some getting used to it and stuff like that. But then part of it is okay, $500,000 house at a 7% interest rate. It's well, it's gonna price some people. It's an unwise decision Whereas like, that wouldn't have been the case in the 80s when you're like, oh, interest rates are 15%. But luckily, this house is like $40,000, right? Like the payment on it only makes up 25-30% of my income, whereas now it's like 45 to 50%. So there certainly is like, I understand waiting if the answer is just like, I can't pay $4,500 a month for a house.
Right. Yeah. And there's some people too, like just so that I'm not, seen as some guy who's just like, get out there.
I wasn't trying to accuse you of that.
Yeah. No, well, because I talked to a bunch of first-time home buyers, and I'll admit this, it's hard. And for some, they put pen to paper and they analyze it and they get themselves pre-approved and realize like, I'm not approved for as much as I want or need to live in a neighborhood that I feel safe in. Like, I'm not going to buy. Okay, totally understand. But I think where people should do the work is to actually figure out and solve for when they're going to buy, how they're going to buy, what type of things that they want and need. And some people, by doing that exercise, come up with an answer. You know what? For my first house, since we have no kids and we don't need a lot, it might be a condo, or it might be able to buy a 2-bedroom and be 5 minutes from the freeway. And in 3, 5, 7 years, I'll upsize to a bigger house when the need arises. Because I saw something recently. There's not single people buying $2,600 houses as much, because one, they don't need it, and two, it's like if you don't need something, you're not going to spend as much as it costs today to buy the larger houses.
Yeah, for sure. I do think the like concept of the starter home is like I don't know. I mean, I just remember like visiting the houses my parents grew up in, and I was like, oh, this is a piece, like I don't think because it's old, it's a piece of junk. I think it was not like, it wasn't a great house.
Always been a piece of junk.
Yeah. They were like, oh, window. My dad was literally, this is in Florida. He's like, ooh, windows. I was like, oh, okay, that's crazy. But like, like that was where they started. By the end of, 30 years later, they lived in a, nice subdivision, had kind of worked their way up. And it's like, you don't really see these like sort of, starter homes anymore, right? Like people kind of jump into the high end of the spectrum. I mean, I don't know.
Might be changing, Sean. We got builders that are building 600 square foot houses, and
no way.
Yeah. I think in San Antonio and some parts of Arizona, but that might be one of many solves for what is an affordability, crisis, if you want to call it that. Is we might have to start building smaller. We definitely want to build more affordable, and depending on what part of the country you're in, easier said than done. In most parts.
Well, my breath was taken away by how much men of the people we are here. It's just like really encouraging starter homes and home affordability here. Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure. Everybody, we have a What the Fed version of the Monday Market Update. Not next Monday, because that is before the Fed meeting. But the following Monday, we have the What the Fed, where we react in more or less live time to the decision at the Fed. We already know what the decision is going to be, but the way that the Fed talks about their decision is really the chewy, newsy part. So excited to do that with you. But we'll have another one of these next week as a regularly scheduled Monday Market Update. Matt, everyone on here, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Take this information, do with it what you will. Educate yourselves, educate your borrowers, and we hope to see you next week. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Sean.